Hi, this is Brett with Charleston SEO. If you've joined us for our series about what our Green-Boost program can do for your site, you've heard me talk about frameworks. In this video, we're going to explore that a little more. While all sites are built on HTML5, your framework is actually what we use to manipulate the HTML5 with. A lot of coders use Dreamweaver, which allows us to work directly in the code. A lot of beginners use Dreamweaver because it is what you see is what you get coding. So a lot of times people who work in Dreamweaver are either very professional or just getting started out. There are also other platforms such as WordPress, Wix, Squarespace that give you sort of a very much improved graphical interface to create and monitor your site with. However, some of these interfaces do not allow you access to the back end. In other words, let's look at a few sites here. This is related to the main video we're doing of what opportunities lie in the Yoga Charleston, South Carolina keyword search. And well, we found a lot of possibilities there. A lot of those possibilities can be affected by what framework these sites are created in. So let's look at Yoga Power Charleston, which is the #1. And the way I always check, being a coder, to see what kind of source code we have is through Chrome. Obviously, you just do a view source. And we can see that this is a Tumblr blog, obviously an upscale one. And obviously, you can use such blogs to rank well with if you know what you're doing, which they do. There's some things here, obviously, that they could do better. And there's also going to be some limitations on how much of it they can do because of the access that Tumblr is going to give them in their client interface. In other words, some of the things we're going to need to do. Let's look at their evaluation from the Google PageSpeed development tool. Okay, for mobile, we're going to need to enable compression on this site. We may not be able to do this, and that may be something that is important for the performance of this site, because if we could enable compression on this site, we could reduce a lot of content by up to 74–77% reduction sometimes. We're also going to find that in the images, I would imagine. Yes, there are some images that are very big in there in the code, and that could be lessened in size, which would make them faster, make the site more efficient. But if we are not allowed access to some of these images, a lot of times in these frameworks, you're being given content, but it's content that you don't control, so you cannot. In other words, if you're downloading Facebook icons, a lot of times from the framework, you don't know if they're optimized, and you may not be given access to optimize them, so you could be penalized for them, even though you're not controlling them. Here, a lot of frameworks, we're not going to go into eliminating the render blocking JavaScript. We'll save that for another one. But what we need to do to speed this site up is, and thus increase its ranking, or make sure that it stays at the top of the game where it is now, we need to be able to fix some of these things. We need to be able to leverage browser caching. If we were able to enable browser caching for some of the main Tumblr scripts that it downloads, the CSS and the JavaScript, then we can improve our speed. But a lot of times these big frameworks won't allow us to go in and adjust the HT access code so that your server can browse and compress, browser cache and compress files. So that being said, some frameworks make it easier for us to do this on. This is one of, when we look at this category, this is 2 sites that are developed on Squarespace. As you can see, it's the #2 competitor. However, Yoga House, I'm forgetting what Yoga House is developed in. Let's check it. And Yoga House is one of the Wix sites. You can see Wix static here in the code for the site. Another framework, drag and drop framework that you can make pretty sites in. But there again, some of the speed recommendations that they need to enable, we may not be able to do because in the framework they're using, we may not have access to those areas to change the code. Now, a good good example of one that we could do more with, but is not being done, is Charleston Community Yoga. If we look at Charleston Community Yoga, we see that it is done in Squarespace as well. In Squarespace, I wanted to say WordPress, as you could tell for a second, one of these is. Squarespace tends to be a little bloated on code, and there's going to be some things that they're not going to allow you access to. But as you can tell, Squarespace can be a contender. Here is a site at number 5 or 4 rather, that obviously is. However, in Squarespace, we can't control the code as much as we can in some of the other different ones. Mission Yoga, let's check them out. They are using WordPress. We can see WP content, themes. That always gives it away whether or not you're using WordPress. WordPress has experienced wild growth. WordPress is one of those things that doesn't take a lot to learn to work with, but it does take some work to be able to master. However, the great thing about WordPress is we can make this close to being as fast as we can a custom HTML site, especially if you're not hosted on WordPress.com. If you've got your own server and you actually have FTP access to the files, then we can do a lot to increase the speed of this. But as you can see here, even in this one, it's got a lot of things that need to happen. So when you're looking at your framework and you're choosing a framework, you should think about which one of these is going to allow you the most control over your code, because that can have a lot to do with how fast and how high you rank. And as you can see here on our review of the top 10 listings for the search term Yoga Charleston, South Carolina on Google on December 3rd, a lot of these frameworks came up high. I'm going to see Tumblr, Squarespace, Wix, Squarespace again. We've got WordPress. And as we move down into the bottom half of the page, which you guys just didn't see, we start to see some HTML come in. Normally, I would give this HTML a grade in that it could be ranking a lot higher, but this was obviously coded by someone who just didn't know how to set it up for speed. So at any rate, we won't go into this sheet on this video either, except to show you how the different frameworks can affect you, and to show you that using a framework is not a bad thing, especially if it allows you to go ahead and get your site done, get it online. It's just that you want to pick a framework that will give you as much speed and as much control as possible. And in my vote for that kind of stuff, I'd go with WordPress. All right. Thanks for visiting. Thanks for listening. We'll have more videos.